Hello and welcome back to the Lowdown, everybody, where today we did a draft challenge picking the best player at every Premier League club so far this season. Coming up on today's show, who has been the best Liverpool player this season?
This is one of the all-time great Premier League seasons.
Do Chelsea need to be worried about Cole Palmer's future? It almost feels like, what was the entire point? Because they haven't really got any further than they were a few years ago. And which top striker's season has gone under the radar?
Standards that he sets, that we almost judge him by, in the way we wouldn't judge any other striker.
Hello and welcome back to the Lowdown, everybody. Mikey McCubbin is away for one more week, so I've pulled out the returning favourites of the Lowdown. Pete Smith, senior football journalist at Sky Sports, and Ollie Thomas, talk CPFC from all platforms, etc. Ollie, welcome back. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me back.
It's great to have you. I thought I maybe just ask you a quick question, because last night was probably quite a special night for you. Jeffrey Schlupp against Mikel Olise in the Champions League.
Seeing Jeffrey Schlupp marauding down that left flank, I was like, where was this Jeffrey Schlupp at Palace? He was locking up Olise. We need a left wing back as well in January, and people were like, oh, the answer was there in front of us the whole time. It was weird, but it was cool.
Oh, epic to see them, Celtic and Bayern. What a moment for Palace, and what a moment for both players, of course, as well. Pete, you also, Esse's now gone to Crystal Palace. How are Millwall doing without him?
Well, they've got a few actual real talents coming through at the moment, young players. Bangura Williams, the pick of them probably at the moment. So, they cashed in and used some of that money, SA money as well. 8 signings brought in during the January transfer window. So that big changes going on at Millwall. Quite exciting as well, I think, with these young players, the potential they've got. Alex Neil, it's been a bit up and down so far, the results, but the idea is that longer term, some of these young players can flourish like SA has.
Love it. And you were telling me this morning about your new Serbian hero.
Yeah, Mihailo Ivanovic. We just picked him up out of Serbia, and suddenly he's just scoring incredible goals for us. Like, do you remember? Did you see the one in the FA Cup where he was down on the floor and sort of just headed it in?
I don't think I did.
It's probably the goal of the season.
Really?
He banged in a free kick last night, which is a bit more orthodox, but some player.
Love it. I love those, hidden gems that come from nowhere. Today, we're not really talking about hidden gems so much. We're basically doing a draft challenge. So if you play fantasy football, you might well do the draft version. There is one version of each player in the game, if that makes sense. And we're going to make a composite 11, myself and Ollie, and Pete will judge the strength of them and basically pick the best player on the basis of this season from every club, but one player from each club in each position, if that makes sense. I don't think I've explained that perfectly, but we'll see how we get along. So let's start with goalkeepers. So to clarify, there's only one, you can only pick one version of each player and one club as well. Ollie, who is your goalkeeper?
I'm going to go for, I think there are options, like obviously Arsenal have been really good defensively, but they've had a lot of good players around the pitch as well. I think I'm going to go for Sells from Nottingham Forest. I think like their success as a team, he has been a big part of that. And I think like one game that really stood out to me this season as one of their biggest games was the Liverpool game. And he made some like huge saves in that. I think goalkeepers cropping up at the right points in games is important. So I'm gonna take Sells.
I like it. It's a good one to take for sure. I mean, because Pete, they've been through a lot of goalkeepers over the last couple of seasons, Turner and Vlachodimos, etc. But they seem to have settled on a really good one there.
Yeah, and it's crucial really for that Nuno setup, isn't it? They're going to be compact, not give much away, but when they do, they need a good goalkeeper to keep it out. And he's certainly been that for them. I think you could probably, as we go through these teams, I wonder if a few more Nottingham Forest defenders might crop up, because it's been a real strength for them. And it's incredible, isn't it, seeing them up there in the top 5 of the Premier League, amazing, mixing it, and what a job Nuno's done there.
Yeah, absolutely remarkable after that difficult spell at Spurs, and obviously in Saudi as well. It didn't go to plan for him either. Okay, so you've gone with Sells. I've kept my Nottingham Forest pick. I've gone with Jordan Pickford. I think this is a really solid one to go for, if I don't say so myself. His save percentage is always really solid. I love watching Jordan Pickford play because he came through at my club, Sunderland, so I've got a slight affiliation with him as well. But also, he's so affronted whenever he has to do his job. He gets so frustrated with the defenders in front of him, even when he is called upon to make amazing saves. He plays he doesn't play on the edge in terms of violence, but he plays on the edge of what's kind of acceptable to treat your teammates, which I always find quite amazing as well. Always booting the post if something goes wrong. He's so fantastic in a relegation scrap as well. And it doesn't feel like Everton are now going to be in that. They've been amazing under David Moyes. Only Matt Sells has kept more clean sheets than Pickford this season. He was second for clean sheets last year behind David Raya. And he's been Everton's player of the season now on 4 occasions. He'll be 31 in March. He's still got seasons to go. I think he'll still be England's number 1 for the World Cup next year. I think he's been a phenomenal player for Everton for a long time.
I mean, that does say a bit about Everton's recent seasons, that he's been their player of the year for the last few years. Yeah, and he's been quite busy, hasn't he, over the last few years?
Has.
And I would suspect neither of you are going to pick any other Everton players elsewhere in your team. So he is the standout performer, obviously kept busy. But someone said on the team the other week to me, he's England's best performer, certainly under the Gareth Southgate era. And I thought, it's quite an interesting shout, isn't it? Because I guess you think of the stars of Kane, whether it's Saka or whoever it is in midfield or defence. But actually, Pickford has always been there, always been the number one choice, regardless of his form at Everton or any question marks about him. He was always being picked by England. I thought that was quite an interesting shout if you think about his career. I think maybe he does get a bit disrespected as well. Pickford certainly gets disrespected by the Newcastle fans whenever they play against him, thanks to those Sunderland connections, Dougie. But maybe a little bit of an underrated keeper.
Yeah, who would you go for the best player of the sort of Southgate era, Ollie?
I would say Pickford. Like, I've thought this before as well, not just because of his consistency, and obviously he was like an ever-present throughout, but he seemed to get better in big moments. Like, he would love those high-pressure moments, which is very un-England-like. Like, I think about like the Italy shootout when he saved Jorginho's penalty. Like, that is not what happened to, and obviously it didn't work. What happened afterwards is very England, but like that moment, I completely agree. He was my other goalkeeper I was arming and ahhing with. I'm a big fan of Pickford. Like, I think if he wanted to go to one of the bigger clubs, like, I think he has the personality and the ability to do that. But he's in a bit of probably a weird place right now where would anyone else, like, would he ever move from Everton? I don't really see why he would.
I think he's pretty settled there, really, isn't he? Yeah.
There's never been too much speculation for it. I'd probably throw John Stones into the mix for best player of the Gareth Southgate era as well. I do think, particularly in 2018 and 2021, at that delayed Euros as well, I thought he was absolutely amazing and has probably been, for me, England's best centre-half of my time watching. Not in terms of quality, like Rio and Terry are above him, obviously, but in terms of performances for England, I don't think he put a foot wrong for a long time. But Pickford would be right up there too. So we've got Sells and Pickford in goal. Ollie, who is your right back? Also, I assume, are we playing 4-3-3?
Yeah.
Cool.
I don't mind if you want to go next. We can do a little, so I don't get first pick every time.
Okay,
that
does.
nice.
Oh, a fair man as well. Excellent. At right back, I used my Nottingham Forest pick. I went with Ollie. I think he's been absolutely phenomenal this year. I think there's an argument that he's probably been the best right back in the league, given the fact that Trent has missed some games as well. Only Matt Sells has played more minutes than him for Forest this year. I mean, his Forest rank for passes completed first, passed into the final third, dribbles completed, defensive actions. He's in the top 3 for all of these as well. The only downside is he's not amazing in the air, but I love the journey he's been on, going over to Torino, then sort of coming back to Fulham. But it's really since going to Nottingham Forest. He was kind of a rotation option, let's say, last year with Nico Williams, whereas now he's just right back every game. I think he's been really, really outstanding for a Forest side that, as we've already mentioned, have been so good defensively as well. And just seems right on it in every game. I don't think there's been a massive undulation in terms of his performances. So I went with Ollie. Who was your right back?
He was, before I picked Sells, that could have been, I actually had Pickford and Aina as my little duo originally. There are actually quite a lot of right back options, weirdly, not because I don't think anyone has been like clearly better than everyone else. I think at right back, I'm torn between two, but I think I'm going to go for Livramento, who I think at Newcastle, like, there's been a bit of a return of an old-fashioned right back, or like maybe not too old-fashioned, but proper two-way right backs. I really like Livramento. I just think like he's the kind of player who could slot into any team and do the job that's required at right back. And him and Lewis Hall as like the fullback pairing at Newcastle is really exciting for them and for England. I nearly considered Munoz from Palace, who has been like instrumental to our kind of revival over the past few weeks, but I think I'm going to give it to Livramento just for consistency. And I think it would be very easy for Eddie Howe to just keep Trippier there, but Livramento, I feel like, has kind of made that spot his own now.
Yeah, I was just going to say it was interesting though that Trippier did come in for that Arsenal second leg when they really wanted to fight and make it a battle.
That was his pure job, wasn't it? Basically, that was just to go around pushing people.
Yeah, but no, I think you're right. I think Livramento, the fact that he's had to do the work on the other side as well in previous seasons for them when Trippier was nailed down, and to then evolve and take on that right back position. Yeah, I love his energy. I think you've got a good shout there that those could be the fullbacks for England under Tuchel going forwards, depending on how he sets up the team, obviously, whether he wants to go for a 3 or not at the back, Tuchel. But Lewis Hall, well, we'll get on to left backs in a minute.
Yeah, definitely got to be in the discussion for sure. I was just going to ask, Ollie, while we got you, a lot of people often accuse our content on here of being too top 6 centric. So whilst we've got you, Crystal Palace's revival, absolutely amazing in the last few months. Who else would you say has really shone under Glasner in this
Munoz has
revival.
been good, hasn't he?
October.
Yeah, Munoz is definitely up there. Like he's been. Dean Henderson's had a really good season as well. One person very unsung hero outside of Palace is Will Hughes, who has just been like he's probably been our player of the season. Which is when you think of the names that Palace have and the hype around people like Gahey and Eze and Mateta. I think if you were to have that vote tomorrow amongst Palace fans, I think Will Hughes would be top 2, like at least. He's just so consistent. He's obviously always been like a really good passer, really technical, but he has that responsibility now and wants to come and get the ball to the centre backs and just like control a game and controls everything and calms everyone down. So I'm a big fan of Will Hughes. I was gonna maybe try to include him later, but I was like, I'm not sure I can go that far because he's almost too underrated that people would accuse me of bias.
Yeah.
And Lacroix as well has been excellent.
I was going to say Lacroix. Every time I go and see Palace, he just looks so steady. He's got so much authority back there. Obviously,
authority is a
you
good
see
word.
Gahey there as well. You know, obviously a class centre back, but to come straight into the Premier League, to play for a team where you are doing a lot of defending, but to look so, as I say, with authority, really impressive.
He's such a leader. Like when we sold Anderson, it was a bit of a worry. I think like his personality that he had in the team and how would we replace that. But Lacroix is probably even more of a leader. Like he's constantly like geeing up the players and the fans, and I think like he's future captain material, definitely.
Love it. Okay, let's move on to our centre backs. You get first pick of the centre backs.
I think I'm actually going to go for Gabriel.
Nice.
Because again, tactics are important with this draft. I think if I think about Arsenal as a team have been really good this season. Like, I know the expectations might have changed, but they're still second in the league and very much in a title race. But I feel like individually, because of the injuries, it's been a little bit stop and start for a lot of their players. You think of like Saka would have been in with a good shout of being on the right wing, but he's been injured for a long time. So obviously Odegaard missed time. I just think Gabriel was just like, he's on the same level as Saliba for me now, which I think if you told someone that, a couple of years ago, people would have laughed at you. They might have said Gabriel's someone that Arsenal probably need to replace, but he can just do everything. Defensively, he's so good. Again, a proper leader, scores goals. Like he's almost like the perfect modern centre-back, I think. Like, I'm a really big fan of Gabriel. I always thought he was good early on as well, but he was just inconsistent. But I think having someone like Saliba next to him means he can be really aggressive and kind of do his own thing while having someone there to sweep up around him. So I'm going to go Gabriel. I don't necessarily think he's been the best centre-back in the league this season, but for this, I'm going to go for him.
I think it's a good pick.
But I think it's been one of the big storylines of the season because when Arsenal went through that phase when Odegaard was injured and more recently when Saka's injured, and those set pieces really come to the fore for them. It was Gabriel, and he got to a point where the Arsenal supporters are chanting, set piece every time they get a corner or a free kick, and it's invariably aimed at Gabriel. Rice's deliveries have been excellent, I think, from the corners. And as I say, they target him, and he does scare those defences when he gets up into the penalty box, which has been a huge part of Arsenal's game this season. And without him scoring some of those goals, they'd be in a worse position than they are. As you say, I think they've done pretty well to sort of roll with the punches they've had this year, to still be in contention. See how Liverpool get on tonight. We're recording ahead of the Villa game, so they could either extend that lead or give Arsenal some hope. But I think Gabriel defensively been really good. I think maybe that partnership hasn't been quite as like stunning as it was last year. Last year they just looked like untouchable. I think they've both made some mistakes this year, but generally Gabriel, excellent.
Yeah, for sure. I think Gabriel was a player that his reputation took a while to kind of catch up with his performances, if that makes sense. I think he made a few there may be a couple of mistakes, a couple of rash moments maybe in his first 18 months in the Premier League. And for some reason with centre-backs, because highlights packages only show the worst moments of centre-backs, and really you need to watch a full 90 to get a full grip of what a player is performing like in that position. It just took ages for people to be like, oh no, he's actually really, really good. And he's been at an excellent level for a while. And as you say, I think Saliba's actually maybe made slightly more individual mistakes, although I'm not trying to create a headline. Both being amazing. Right, my first centre-back is a bold shout, not because of his ability, but because of what it means for the rest of my team. But I just got Virgil van Dijk in there. I thought about this, and yes, it has permutations around the pitch. There won't be any Salah in my team.
Yeah, wow.
But I thought Van Dijk was actually potentially a bigger difference maker, which is mental as it sounds, because he's just been absolutely faultless this year. His ground duel success rate, his aerial duel success rate is actually slightly down on last year, but I actually think with the ball, he's been so composed as ever, and the leadership that he'd bring to my team as well, you can't sort of put that to one side. No one has completed more passes into the final third than him, and I just think Liverpool have largely, and I know there is a risk of recording this before that Villa game, but largely been pretty unruffled. And Van Dijk, I just don't think I've seen him particularly stressed in any situation, really. I mean, in the Champions League, 7 out of 8, absolutely remarkable. I've actually been so impressed with his durability as well, because he has picked up sort of small, consistent injuries over the last couple of years, maybe 2-3 games per season, aside from that, obviously, massive ACL. But this year, he's been absolutely ever-present. And yes, it's Liverpool's attack and attacking depth that has ultimately, created this lead over Arsenal. But if they weren't so solid at the other end, of which Van Dijk has been crucial, because Andy Robertson to one side of him has had one hell of a fall off, I think they'd be in a completely different situation. So I've got Van Dijk in there.
Makes you wonder what Mo Salah would have to do to get into Dougie's team.
I know, yeah.
That's massively overrated. Massively overrated.
That's taken a lot of stress out of that tactic. If I'd somehow let Salah fall to you, it would have been absolute curtains.
Yeah, you don't need to see the Matrix numbers anymore. Okay, so I get next centre-back pick, I think, is how it works. Yeah. And I've gone with a player that doesn't actually play as a centre-back for his current team, but I've gone with Josko Gvardiol. I think he's been amazing this season, and I think there are some outstanding left backs to include from smaller teams as well. But I think he's been absolutely brilliant. He is obviously a centre back, but he's playing at left back, and I think he's been City's probably most consistent player this year. I know that's not saying a lot. They've obviously had their worst season since Pep's first year, and potential of it being even worse as well. But in a season in which they've really struggled, his outlet on the left-hand side for a centre back playing out there as well, he's made them not really miss João Cancelo in that position, which I think is something that goes slightly under the radar as well. He's second for carries into the final third in the entire Premier League. That's not very normal behind Iwobi, and very, very solid in terms of his duels as well. I think he's been close to faultless. Do I want to see him on the ball as much as he's been for City? Probably not in an ideal world. You'd hope that other players would have, been a bit more inventive at times, because it has been often left to him to really create damage in the final third, which is not obviously ideal, but you can't really fault him for the way he stepped up. So I've got Van Dijk and Gvardiol as my two.
That is pretty stellar.
I'm just going to step in here because I heard Dougie mention this earlier on, that he got Gvardiol on his team. I thought, do the stats match my own eye test of Gvardiol's season? No outfield player has made more errors leading to a shot this season than Josko Gvardiol.
But he's got Van Dijk next to him in that team.
That is problem annulled. That is an interesting stat. I am quite surprised by that, to be honest.
Well, Gary Neville put Gvardiol in his team of the season so far in January. And I disagreed with that, because if you look at some of the most damaging defeats that City have had, Gvardiol was making the errors. Now, okay, not
Spurs,
Premier League,
for sure.
but Spurs, Feyenoord, he made the errors that led to that collapse, which just set them on this terrible road and sort of exposed their vulnerability. I really like him. I agree with a lot of what you said. I just feel this season I wouldn't have him in my team.
Fair enough. I wanted a City player in it, and I found it very difficult because I want another striker, ideally. Again, we're doing a little bit of a spoiler here. But I found it quite difficult to pick another City player, to be totally honest.
I thought the same. I think he was the only Man City player who I had written down in like any position. It's kind of similar-ish to Arsenal in some ways, where it's like it's difficult to pick a standout player because people have kind of gone in and out of form, and City obviously had a really bad run by their standards. I think Gvardiol would probably be my first choice for Man City as well, but yeah, is
that our sort of Haaland bias? Like we spoke about it on the Sky Sports News today, Dougie, didn't we? About these standards that he sets, that we almost judge him by, in the way we wouldn't judge any other striker. The amount of goals that he's scored. We just take it for granted.
For sure. 27 this season before the Real Madrid game. It's pretty remarkable in mid-February.
We're saying he wouldn't even get close into contention for getting into either of these teams. Yeah. Maybe a little bit unfair on him. 24 years old, but such are his standards. It's considered a slightly poor season by his standards so far, isn't it?
Ollie, who is your second centre-back?
You could flip a coin between either of these two. They both play for the same team. I'm going to go for Huijsen.
Nice.
From Bournemouth, just because you could have him or Zaberni. They've both been obviously unbelievable. Both similar aesthetics on the pitch as well, which are quite like low socks, short sleeve gloves, very matchy. He has obviously came from Juve and has just been amazing. I think for like to be that young as a centre back and to perform so well in the Premier League is like it's probably the hardest position to come in and like dominate in as a teenager. I think he's 19, isn't he? It's crazy in a Bournemouth team which has been incredible this year, and him and Zaberni have been the main part of that. I think it's quite funny now reading that apparently Juve want a young centre-back.
Yeah.
You had one and got rid of him.
It is mental. A lot of their fans are complaining that they sold Huijsen and then they brought in Lloyd Kelly, who'd just been signed on a free by Newcastle, 6 months later.
That's not great.
Not ideal squad building from them.
And the resilience of him, I think there's been some stories this week about how difficult he found it when you told him, look, we don't want you anymore. So the resilience to then come back and prove that point.
A few goals as well he scored, doesn't he, this year?
Absolutely.
Scored at Old Trafford.
Okay, you can kick off with the left-backs, I think.
Again, good left-back options. I like it when it's outside the big six as well. I think the three I had written down are all outside the traditional big six. I'm going to go for Robinson again, though, from Fulham. Yeah. I just think, like, I spoke about marauding fullbacks. He's like the definition of that. Just so good going forward, so good defensively. And he's also done it now over like a long period of time. I think, like, since last season, he's been really good. And I think a lot of people might have thought, oh, he's like a kind of a one season. He had a really good season, then he was going to drop off. But he's almost like got better. So many assists as well. Like, he's the complete left back. I don't really see a team in the league that he wouldn't start for at the moment, the way he's playing. And
surely, I mean, Liverpool need a left back this season.
Yeah, and he fits that. Fits absolutely perfectly. Yeah. I think there are some good shouts like Lewis Hall we spoke about earlier. Kirkes as well from Bournemouth, who I really like. But obviously, I just picked Bournemouth before. But Robinson is definitely the standout for me.
I think he's been absolutely brilliant. I think people would be even more excited for the summer if he was just that little bit younger. But I think he's, 27, 28. So that's maybe a slight issue in terms of where he moves to. But also, I think fans of smaller clubs, I speak as a Sunderland fan as well, get quite frustrated when a player just does well and then we instantly like, oh, they need to take that manager or that player, etc. He's doing a great work at a big club in Fulham. I went with Kirkes. There was a number of Bournemouth options as well. I thought about Justin Cliver. Semenyo has maybe not been quite as exceptional recently as he was at the start of the season, but still had a great campaign. Dango Ratara has really filled in very well as a striker as well. But Kirkes, I think, has put in probably the outstanding performance I've seen from a defender this season. I thought against Man City, when they beat them 2-1 at the Vitality, he was amazing that day. And that was a Man City side that weren't in the funk that they subsequently got themselves into as well. He was frighteningly good, just up and down that left flank, and looks like, again, just an amazing pickup from a Bournemouth recruitment team that have been shopped in interesting places. Coming from AZ Alkmaar, they've shopped obviously at Barcelona and Juventus and Sassuolo and clubs like that, and taken players and sort of tried to rebuild them. But this is a player that they backed and has come in and made an enormous difference as well. So Milos Kirkes is in my side. Right, let's move into midfield, and I'm going to kick off with my defensive midfielder. And I've gone with Declan Rice.
Wow.
Yeah. I went straight in with Declan Rice.
No, that's great news. That's great news again. This is working out really well.
I'm delighted with all of my picks. So Arsenal is free for Ollie for some other position. But I think Declan Rice has kind of gone under the radar this season because he started quite slowly. I think it's fair to say he started quite slowly. Look, we've seen this year with international tournaments in the summer, with expanded European competition, a lot of players that didn't have a pre-season have taken a while to grow into the season. I think Foden's probably he's definitely had a bit of a drop-off. Ollie Watkins probably hasn't had as good a season as he wanted. And Declan Rice, by his own admission, I mean, he was speaking to Sky about it a couple of weeks ago, did start the season quite slowly. But I think since mid-December, I think he's really, really started to find his best form. And there's this big debate in the Arsenal fan community about whether he should be a 6, whether he should be an 8. I think maybe I should leave that to more Arsenal fans than me, because I just love seeing him wherever. I think he can do both roles really effectively, and the ability for him to just drive past opponents, get teams up the pitch. We've already mentioned his set piece ability as well. He's a brilliant all round footballer, and people forget that he's only in his second season of playing for Arsenal, a club with so much more pressure than West Ham, and he's first name on the team sheet for England going forward. He's one of Arsenal's key players. I think he's had a really underrated time at Arsenal. I think he's got praise to a certain degree, but maybe not to the extent that he should have, just for the ease he's made that transition. Being a £100 million player as well, how many of those work out as well as he had? Only Saka's created more chances than him this year. Only Saka's provided more assists. I think he's been absolutely brilliant. So Declan Rice was my first in midfield. And
the leadership examples as well, we see all the time from him. And Dougie, the evolution of him as a player. So when he comes through at West Ham, it's like he goes into midfield, but this will probably be a guy who ends up going back into centre-back. He turns out to be a fantastic box-to-box midfielder, as you say, first name on the team sheet for England and Arsenal right now. Incredible that when you see him with the ball or without the ball, he's such a central figure to everything Arsenal do.
I feel like he's actually almost a victim of his own versatility. Like you say, people debate where he's best because he could do so many roles to such a high level. I think Arteta's probably just have to pick one thing from to be like, okay, this is where you fit in. We've got to build the rest of the team. We've got to have a system that works for everyone. But interesting to see what that role is, because I agree. Like 6, he's amazing. Number 8, he's amazing. What's his best position? Who knows?
Is that because Arsenal haven't really got another midfielder? So you got Odegaard obviously there as the creative one of that 3. Then you got Rice. And they've not really found one who really nails down that other position. So Thomas Partey hasn't really quite been that anchor. And then Kai Havertz hasn't really had the opportunities, or hasn't been needed to play that sort of left-sided, more forward-thinking midfielder role so much. So it's almost like, I think if they could get that third part right, then you'd see Rice's
Well, it looks
role
like it's going to
down.
be Zubimendi in the summer, potentially.
Well, there you go.
And then he'll play in that left-sided role. I think Arsenal's left-hand side has kind of suffered through Granit Xhaka's departure as well. Like, he was so good at finding that inside channel between right-back and centre-back for Martinelli to run onto. And I think it is a key reason behind Martinelli's drop-off in form, because he's often having to pick up the ball wider and deeper than when Xhaka was able to find him. And Declan Rice's long-range passing is very good, but his through balls aren't a touch on Granit Xhaka's. I mean, I don't think there's really that many players in Europe that are as good on a through ball as Granit Xhaka. But that's no slight on Rice. You know, the fact he can play in all those roles so effectively, I think he's a brilliant footballer. Ollie, who would be your sort of more defensive-minded player?
I was convinced you were going to pick this player. Hence why I was doing some research off camera, because I was like, there's no way you can let him fall to me. But I'm going to go for Caicedo as my holding midfielder. I just last time I was on here, I raved about him, and I'm going to rave about him again. I just think his versatility. Obviously, he's played right back a bit this season too, done that to a high level. A holding midfielder who's done that to a high level. He can pass the ball, carry the ball, win the ball back. Like, for me, he's one of the best midfielders in the league. Like, I have him in the same bracket as Rice and as Gravenberch this year, who have obviously been amazing in their own right. If I was to build any team now, I would want to find a way of getting Caicedo into it. I always liked him at Brighton, even though I'm a Palace fan. I quietly really rated him. And now he's gone to Chelsea. I just think he's kind of proved to be worth the money they paid. And I think at the time, obviously, he started quite slowly and people were doubting him, but he looks like he belongs in that team. And that obviously they've been up and down a bit, especially in recent weeks. Like, they're struggling to find a bit of consistency. But watching him in the flesh as well, I watched him at Selhurst this season, and he just, like, players don't dribble near him. Like, they just avoid him because he just controls the area that he operates in. And yeah, I'm a big fan of him.
How worried, Pete, do you think Chelsea fans should be with their current form? You know, with that really damaging result, felt like on Friday against Brighton. A lot of defensive mistakes in there. Colwill, Cucurella, like, a lot of players in that team are now coming under pretty immense pressure for their sort of status in that side.
Yeah, I covered that game, and it's one of those ones at the end you sort of think, where is this Chelsea team going? This whole project going? Now, I know, if we rewind a couple of months when it was looking much better for them, suddenly the ideas of signing all these young players together and getting the group together looked good. But, Maresca had a big wobble. Not a big wobble. He had a wobble with Leicester last season when he was taking them up. There was big questions about him and whether he should be staying in charge then. And he's sort of getting to a similar position, I think, with Chelsea now, where how good a job is he doing? Now, from his perspective, he's saying that it wasn't even his remit to get Champions League football qualification this year. Chelsea have said this week that still remains their priority, to get Champions League football this year. Based on the performance on Friday night, they won't be getting it. It was really poor, and for a club that spent £1 billion, you look at the goalkeeper, not good enough. You look at the centre backs. Chalobah's been good, was good at Palace and recalled, but that's the situation they're at, where Chalobah and Cole will still making mistakes, but young defenders, they're going to do that. Cucurella, poor defending for one of the goals from Minter. You can go through the team really. Cole Palmer, this stat that I'm obsessed with, that he's created more chances than any other player since the 4th of December and got 0 assists. That tells you all you need to know about Chelsea's finishing and their how clinical they are in the final third, crying out for a real finisher that isn't Nicholas Jackson. And Kunku, I thought might take his chance, just didn't get involved enough as well. So yeah, you walk away from that game more questions than answers about Chelsea and where they're going.
The Chalobah piece is interesting, actually, because obviously him getting recalled from Palace was a blow. Like, he was starting for us and we had a really settled back three. But I think a lot of Palace fans said that if you had to kind of rank Guéhi, Lacroix and Chalobah in terms of performances, Chalobah was the worst of the three over the season. So that's not to say he was bad, because Lacroix and Guéhi have been really good this season. But I think the fact obviously the whole debacle about him leaving in the first place and then bringing him back is one thing. But I don't think he was ever going to come in and like hold down that right centre back slot, especially in a 2 with Colwill. Like, I think a lot of Chelsea fans were kind of buzzing for him to come back, and obviously I get that academy player, you want to see it, but I'm not surprised really that it's not improved them defensively, because it's a big ask coming back in, and I don't think that him and Colwill as a partnership was going to really flourish, even though I like and rate both of them a lot. I think for them to be in that situation where they had to recall him and then rely on him is pretty astonishing, to be honest.
Yeah, I want to see more from Colwill, to be fair. I think he could be like England's next star centre-back, along with probably Gehi, but you just want to see more. I just thought it was quite embarrassing what happened on Friday night, and this is a player he's not particularly new to the Premier League either as well. Like, he does need to start really putting out those performances. Either way, second midfielder, Ollie, you get first dibs.
So, again, forward planning here. I really wanted to include Mateta later on, but I was like, I can't possibly do that. So I'm going to ignore what I said earlier, and I'm going to put Will Hughes in there as well as midfielder.
Get him in.
Exactly. As I said, last season he was also really good with Adam Wharton, but deservedly so, Wharton got all the plaudits because he is an unbelievable footballer. But Hughes was brilliant at the back end of last season. Got injured towards the end, and then he came back at the start of this year. It was just, we've had quite a lot of injuries in midfield. Obviously, Wharton's missed a lot of minutes. Lerma's been in and out. Decore's been injured, and Hughes has just been so, like, it's just been a stronghold in there. He's been ever present, resilient, controls the games, like defensively, offensively. He's such a fan favourite. Like, everyone at Palace loves him, and as I said, I think outside of Palace, you'd be forgiven for thinking that he's kind of just this like bog standard, boring midfielder. But he's been brilliant this year. And that's actually kind of like, he kind of reminds me a bit of Lewis Cook in the way that they're quite similarly profiled players who have been really good for their teams this season. But people outside of those clubs don't necessarily give them the plaudits they deserve. So I'm going to give him the plaudits he deserves right now.
It is funny. Literally, no one mentions him until you go to Sellers Park.
Yeah.
And they're chanting his name, cheering every touch. And it's like, who's this guy? Such a fan favourite.
Yeah, he's brilliant.
But when you watch him up close playing, you realise why.
And we were talking the other day at Palace actually about how one of the big kind of indictments of Vieira's era was his refusal to play Will Hughes in midfield when we had a bit of a crisis, and he insisted on playing Jeffrey Schlupp there the whole time. Celtic's marauding left back.
Exactly. Champions League favourite. Wow.
And you look at it now and you're like, how is he not getting a game? Like, he's probably our best outside of Wharton. He's definitely our best midfielder outside of Wharton.
Yeah, he's so solid technically as well. You can kind of give him the ball in any situation. As is my next midfield pick, I left you Anthony Robinson because I wanted to get in Alex Iwobi, who I think has had a special season. 7 goals and 3 assists this season. And in a campaign in which Raul Jimenez's form has gone up and down, Adama Traore is still Adama Traore, although he does have some phenomenal moments. There's a lot of inconsistency there. Emile Smith-Rowe maybe had a quite quiet last couple of months up until more recent weekends. I think Alex Iwobi, aside from Anthony Robinson, has been the real star of this Fulham side that are in with a shout, loosely, of European football this season. You know, he ranks first in Europe for carries into the final third. That is absolutely remarkable for a player that is playing for a side that doesn't have forwards at least centre forwards that are going to stretch play that dramatically as well. He is just so comfortable in a variety of roles, and considering that he was seen as a pure winger when he was emerging at Arsenal, did play a little bit off the striker as well, to be this kind of marauding, dynamic central midfielder / central attacking midfielder and be this comfortable on the ball in pretty much any scenario and just run and look so powerful and effective, I think is really, really remarkable. You know, he's on 4.4 shot creating actions per 90 this season. So that's the shot or the pass that leads to a shot, which is more than Luis Diaz. It's more than Anthony Gordon. It's more than Szoboszlai, who are all playing for better sides than Fulham as well. I think Alex Iwobi has been brilliant. My backup in this position, who I think deserves a shout out as well, definitely in terms of underrated, Mikel Damsgaard. I think it's been brilliant for a Brentford side that lost a number of key players in the summer, and Tony, and have had Hickey and Henry out, and Igor Thiago, their Tony replacement, got injured. So Damsgaard definitely deserves a shout, but I wanted Alex Iwobi in there. I mean, Fulham, Pete, they never really create any negative headlines. They never really create too many positive headlines, but they probably do deserve a bit more credit for what they've done this season.
Oh, they're a pleasure to watch. The combination in the first half of the season of Robinson, Smith-Rowe and Iwobi, that trio going down that left side is so good to watch. And then obviously Nelson had a running the team on that left side. So Iwobi went over to the right side. As you mentioned, his adaptability. They're a really good team. Marco Silva's done a fantastic job with those players. A lot of players that other clubs didn't want or couldn't get the most out of, he started to do that. They're riding high in the table and just wondering how high they can finish. But stylistically, just to watch them, they're a fantastic team to go and watch.
They have got some nice narratives in their team. You touched on it there. Like, I'm a big Raul Jimenez fan. Like his comeback, and it's kind of spearheaded by Marco Silva. Had a similar thing. Like, obviously really highly rated at Watford, goes to Everton. His stock kind of crashed a bit, and now, they're just kind of like quietly being really good and fun. They're a really fun team. And that's what football's all about,
100%. Right, I get first dibs at the number 10. And I went with Cole Palmer. We've already mentioned him, but he's in. He's in as the star of my midfield, playing in front of Alex Iwobi and Declan Rice. What a midfield to watch, by the way, as well. Wanted to give a shout out to Dejan Kulusevski, who I think has had a great year at Spurs. The only Spurs player I really considered for this 11 as well. 6 goals, 4 assists. Second for chances created in the Premier League. But first, already mentioned him, Cole Palmer. I think he's been brilliant. Only Rafinha, Alex Baena and Ito have created more chances in the entirety of Europe. And he's playing for a Chelsea side whose wingers have not created the numbers, at least, and the consistent danger that they did perhaps in the early stages of the season. And Enzo Maresca's come in for some flack at the use of wingers and maybe not doing early enough substitutions, which is what he was sort of pulling out in August and September. But Cole Palmer, I don't think, can be really faulted for anything to do with Chelsea's drop-off in recent performances. I think he's a really special footballer to watch. And so comfortable now with his status in the game. And I like how he just hasn't changed personality whatsoever either. Just is so disinterested in anything to do with the media, which is quite almost refreshing. It's a bit of a throwback to sort of 10, 15 years ago. He just wants to go out and play football. And he's been absolutely remarkable. As I say, 4th for chances created in Europe, but 22 players have created more assists than him. So there just hasn't been the numbers to reflect his dominance in terms of his underlying numbers. I think he's been absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, and his box office as well. I think Chelsea's last few weeks shouldn't detract or shouldn't let you forget just how brilliant he was. Earlier in this season where everything he touched turned to gold. He was scoring like 4 goals in one game, didn't he? And all these assists that he was coming up with. But it's more than that. It's just that X factor he's got. I remember going down to watch the game on Boxing Day with Fulham, and Chelsea actually weren't great that day. But Cole Palmer did exactly what you want to see when you turn up and presumably pay loads of money to go and watch Chelsea play in the Premier League, and you see him spin his man and smack it in from 20 yards. And that's the sort of the magic and the stardust that he's got. And we saw it for England at the Euros as well when he scores in the final and comes on and has the impact there. And he's a magic player.
I don't want to throw you under the bus, Ollie, but Carragher and Neville on the back of Friday night were talking about the sort of headspace that Cole Palmer could be in going forward with Chelsea. Is it a sort of situation that you do see that they need to qualify for the Champions League this year, that they need to start challenging for trophies? Otherwise, this guy's just almost becomes too good for Chelsea.
100%. Like it should be a bit of a concern also, like, in terms of the way they've structured their transfers and stuff. Obviously, Palmer's on an 8-year, just signed an extension, crucially, to become 8 or 9 years. If he turns around and goes, right, I want to leave, then I genuinely don't know what would happen, because how much would someone have to pay to get Cole Palmer out of Chelsea because of his contract length and because of his age and because of his ability? It could turn messy. I think he obviously is, stats wise, one of the best players in Europe at the moment. And again, he's carried that on from last year, where he obviously burst onto the scene. And I think whilst his numbers have probably gone down in terms of pure output, I think as an all-round player, he's got better. I think you can see the way he moves around in games and controls games and sets up teammates. He's just an unbelievable player, and he has to play at the top level 100%. So, but I'd struggle to see how that would transpire at the moment. I don't know what someone would have to do. It would be insane money.
He's Wolf Zaha himself. That famous phrase.
Yeah.
Just think about which clubs would be being able to play £125 million, £130 million really at the moment. We've just done a story about Man United's finances at the moment. Not good. Spoiler, not good. Man City, obviously, we know the situation there. We'll find out more about their situation in the next month or so. But what they're going to do forward, Liverpool aren't going to be spending that amount on transfer fees. So
Real Madrid have got Bellingham.
Real Madrid, Bellingham, Mbappe, and all that front line. Are they going to spend a lot of money on Cole Palmer? I can't see that. Is Cole Palmer going to go to Madrid and soak up the Spanish lifestyle? I'm not sure I can see that from him either. So I think his medium future is at Chelsea. And I think they will pick up, and I keep feeling like they will get this project right eventually. Once whether that will be Maresca or not, whether that will be next season or the season after.
But what is right? Because the strength at the top of the Premier League. I know Man City have taken a dip this year as well, but do you see them getting close to Liverpool next year, bar like a really dramatic exodus from Liverpool, which could still happen, or some amazing signings from Chelsea? I still feel like they'll be at least 10, 15 points off Liverpool next year, bar a huge change. And there's nothing wrong with finishing second or third in the Premier League, but it's just not what you expect after this level of investment. And maybe they'll start challenging for the Cups more. Maybe they'll have a deep run in the Champions League. But it almost feels like, what was the entire point? Because they haven't really got any further than they were a few years ago. I know they've got younger, and there's been some great player trades, and they turned some great benefits of some upturn in players that they brought in. Madueke's improved, Enzo Fernandez, Caicedo, Palmer, obviously, etc. But what tangible success has there been from this outlay? Not very much, and does it look like changing particularly quickly? I'm not so sure.
Also, like you say earlier about how Maresca said, our goal this season wasn't to qualify for the Champions League. Like, you spent over £1 billion and you're not even aiming, in theory, to go for the Champions League. Like, what do you mean? I understand that the project is about youth and it's a long-term project, and you can sell that to Palmer I think obviously he should give it time if he was ever thinking of leaving. But £1 billion to not even be aiming to qualify in the Champions League, which is only one place higher than they finished last season, because it should go down to 5 places this year. Like, if that's not your goal now, then what is the goal? Yeah, I don't get it.
Get your thoughts, Chelsea fans, in the comments. Who is your number 10 or more creative midfielder, Ollie?
You mentioned him, Kulusevski. I just think, obviously, it's been a really difficult season for Spurs, and I think a lot of players have had to shoulder a lot of responsibility. Like, obviously, so many injuries, and some players have really flourished in that team. Obviously, recently, like Jed Spence has come in and done really, really well. But I think Kulusevski's been kind of the shining light. Again, he was someone who, like last season, it was a bit, well, what is he like? Is he going to make it as a player for a top team? But I think he's really coming to his own now. And I think, again, not just going forward, you mentioned chances created, but I think he works really hard defensively as well. He's also versatile, which I like. Obviously, I think in big games this year or against bigger teams, better teams, he's played on the right quite a lot. I just think he's the kind of player who any manager will want to have in their team. He's kind of similar to Palmer in lots of ways.
Yep, he's brilliant. Man City's chief nemesis. Right, let's move into the forward line. You get first pick on right wing, and I think I know where you go.
Yeah, have a wild guess what I'm going to go for. Yeah, it's obviously Salah. I think it seems like it's not been spoken about enough that he's already got 23 goals this season. Like, he's got 37 goal contributions already, and it's February. That, I know everyone's been talking about him for the Ballon d'Or, etc., but it's almost like unbelievable to hear that, and that's just in the Premier League. I know that, some people say that, he just, he only pops up with goals and that's all he does in games. But first of all, that's a silly argument. Scoring goals is the whole point of football. Yeah. If there's any skill to be good at it, it's scoring. But also just like, again, the consistency with which he's done this now, to do this after Klopp as well. I think like Arne Slot to come in and do what he's done post Klopp. I don't think anyone saw this coming, this level of dominance, and Salah's just gone with it. And he's obviously going to win player of the season unless something crazy happens between now and the end of the year. This is one of the all-time great Premier League seasons, and I feel like it's almost not being appreciated to the level it should be, even though everyone is talking about it. It should be like, oh my gosh, this is mental.
I think we talked about it on the football show the other day, Pete. He set the record for most goal involvements away from home as well. Those are the hardest games to win.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's it's around 60% of Liverpool goals come from him. So it's like he is the man, and he's doing it for Liverpool, and he's leading them to this Premier League title, and at 32 as well, and in the last knock-ins of his contract. So for all the speculation off the field, and obviously he's had plenty to say about that as well when he's been talking to the media, he's so focused. And this has got to be a big thing when how does this work in the contract negotiations when you're scoring every week and you're saying I'm 32? What do you mean? Are you not going to give me a 3 or 4 year contract? Look at me. And he takes his shirt off at Southampton, doesn't he? And he's got this stunning physique. And you're like, this guy isn't going anywhere, by the way. This isn't a player who's just like coming to the end of his career, or maybe just give him a 1 year contract because it could drop off a cliff. This guy's going to keep scoring goals for years to come, surely, because there's no sign of a drop off from him at all. And I think in an era where you've got the likes of Harry Kane talking about wanting to play till 40, you've got obviously Ronaldo still playing at his age as well, and Lewandowski, another one. Just you can just keep going through them. These players that would normally be retiring or thinking about retiring 34, 35, they're going on longer now. And Salah, he looks as good as ever.
He does. He certainly does. I mean, mine almost feels a bit silly in comparison. I was actually prepared to say Jared Bowen, but I think on the basis of this year, West Ham have been so poor. I don't really want to include a West Ham player. I'm actually going to go for Bryan Mbeumo. I think losing Tony, I've already talked about Igor Thiago being injured. They've had quite a lot to deal with, Brentford, over the last few years, like a huge, vast injury crisis. Yet, despite that, they haven't really been under threat of relegation. They had the Christian Eriksen, arrival at the club, added so much to them, and then left 6 months later. So many injuries in key positions, like their wing-backs, Henry and Hickey, haven't been fit for so long now. And yet he produces these numbers year on year and year. And Visser has been the guy that was linked, at least in January, to a number of clubs. But Bryan Mbeumo, I'm not sure whether he's going to play in the Champions League, to be totally honest, unless a top player leaves, like a Spurs or a United or something, and they have a dramatic sort of upheaval in form. I'm not sure whether he's ever going to be City, Arsenal, Liverpool level, but for Brentford right now, I think he's been absolutely brilliant. Right, let's move into the final two positions. Let's start with left wing, and I was prepared to talk about Matheus Cunha, but I'm actually changing to Morgan Rogers, who has been playing on the left a lot for Villa this year, and I think has been Villa's outstanding player. Obviously, there's been so much upheaval at that club in terms of transfers. A lot of their summer transfers were clearly built around improving their squad, were then loaned out. Their January signings look like they're much more based around improving that first team. But Morgan Rogers has been the sort of shining light in a side that Ollie Watkins, as I mentioned earlier, probably not been at his absolute best. There was the John Duran sort of fireball moment, then he leaves, etc. But Morgan Rogers' consistency in big games in the Champions League, in the Premier League, even the game they lost at home, the only game they lost at home going into the game against Liverpool, against Arsenal, he was absolutely sensational that day as well. 6 goals and 4 assists in the league, still learning his trade, plays, as a central attacking midfielder, all wide on the left. I think Morgan Rogers has been absolutely brilliant. So who'd be my left winger? Who was yours, Ollie?
I am going to go for Cunha.
Nice.
As you said. I think it's because I've watched players or a player like that at Palace in Wilfried Zaha in a team that is underperforming, that's unbalanced in lots of ways. Cunha just has that ability to just drag them through moments and through games. And I think his goal against Liverpool on Sunday was so brilliantly taken. But I loved it's one of my favourite goals I've seen in a while was the one against Villa, the 2-0 kind of dagger goal where he just did that little dummy and just sent the defenders and then put it in the bottom corner. He's such a quality footballer.
Yeah.
And again, like versatility wise, I think that will really count in his favour. If he does move on from Wolves this summer, I think he could slot into a lot of different teams in a lot of different positions. Yeah. And again, like when he joined from Atletico, I think people kind of raised their eyebrows a bit and he started slowly. And I remember watching him, I think it was the first game of last season, away at Man United, and Wolves were quite unlucky that day. And I think he took him a while to score that season generally. But I watched that game and thought, like, he's definitely got something. He was carrying the ball really well and looked like a real handful, but now he's turned that into actual output. And that's I'm a big fan of him.
He's got that look, hasn't he? I think his physique and his technique and the way he carries the ball, he just looks like a classy player as well. And, scoring against, the big sides, I think always shows that this is a player who loves the big occasion. And he does seem to go up a level when Wolves have got a big team in town. And, he's obviously had a few sort of wobbles, didn't he, during January, where he was thinking maybe he'd be getting a move, and there was a bit of a strop at Chelsea, I remember, at Stamford Bridge, and you're just sort of wondering which way it might go, but it looks like he's knuckled down. He's obviously signed a contract with a release clause in it, which I suspect could well be activated in the summer. But just on Rodgers, just finally doing it, went up and spoke to Emery earlier in this season and asked him about Rodgers. It's really interesting the way that he sort of man-managed Rodgers. So when he signed him, obviously came in, he'd been at Middlesbrough, and he was just like, I still see you as a Championship player until you show me you're a Premier League player. That's the first thing he said to Rodgers, and he's like, "Oh, that's an interesting way to talk to a new player." And it was just that mindset that he wanted him to stay in during training, and I've got to prove, got to show that I'm ready for this level. And I spoke to him just after some good performances from Rodgers and said, what do you think of this player? He said, we've not even tapped anywhere near the potential yet. This guy, he can go so high. And that's the feeling about him at Villa. He's a real gem in the making, Rodgers. And I think, his performances this season have shown that.
He's been brilliant. So, so powerful. Absolutely amazing player to watch. Right. Ollie, you've got potential tap-in at striker.
There are actually so many good strikers to choose from. Because
are.
I was just panicking briefly at my list there going, oh my God, I can't pick Isak or Wood. And I've not planned appropriately. Who else is there? And I was like, well, I could go Delap, I could go Welbeck, I could go down a variety of different routes, but I am going to go for the tap-in of Haaland because I've not got a City player yet. Again, like we spoke about different standards, he's still got 19 Premier League goals this season. It feels like no one is talking about it because he's just that good. And I think I like what they've done with him this year in that they've kind of used his physicality, I think, a lot better and not been afraid to just launch it long and be like, go and get it. But also recently in the Newcastle game, using him as a bit of like a gravitational pull and bringing him deeper, and then Marmoush can run off him. I think somehow he's really underrated in the Premier League. I think people like to talk about how, he can't dribble properly. Someone like Isak is a much more well-rounded player. But like Haaland is probably the best striker the Prem has ever seen, maybe, apart from Henry, perhaps. Like I think... shouldn't be a hot take. I think like his positional sense and everything he does is just he's an elite player, and I can't believe I've managed to get him.
Yeah, you have done well. To be fair, I forgot you had Livramento. I thought you were having Isak, who's the player that I picked. Yeah. I've obviously got Gvardiol playing at position at centre back as well, because I wanted Isak in. I think he's just scored in big games this year. It's as simple as that for a Newcastle side that have had injury issues. Barnes has missed games. Callum Wilson's barely been fit all year. But he scored twice against Spurs. He scored against Chelsea. He scored against Arsenal. He scored against Forest. He scored against Villa. He scored against United. He absolutely ran Saliba and Gabriel ragged in both legs of a Carabao Cup semi-final. This is really quite special stuff from a striker that's still effectively learning his trade, similar to Haaland as well. Neither are probably the finished article. And there's very little to add on him. Long-range strikes, that Thierry Henry finish from the left-hand side of the box, opening himself up. Like he's headers as well. He's suddenly got very good in the air all of a sudden as well. He's just a real complete package. 17 goals and 5 assists in 23 games. I think it's absolutely remarkable for a Newcastle side that have struggled a little bit in their depth. They haven't necessarily been able to strengthen in the way they would have want to over the last couple of windows. I think he's been absolutely brilliant, and it's going to cause a lot of headaches around those selection committees who make team of the years. If Haaland gets close to the Golden Boot, I mean Salah's going to win it, but ends up being the second top scorer, and then Isak's there as well. There's going to be some very angry people online. But when is there not angry people online?
That'll make a change.
That is just online world. Okay, that was actually interesting. None of us, we didn't really overlap at all. We were in the same ballpark, but. Yeah. Can you just briefly read out your completed 11, and then Pete can decide which one he likes best? So Pete, get your thinking cap.
So I need to make sure I get this right. I had Sells in goal, Livramento, then I had Gabriel and Howson, however you pronounce it, as my centre-back partnerships, and then I had Robinson as my left-back. I had Caicedo, Will Hughes and Kulusevski as my midfield three. It's a very random combination of players. Well, I mean, Will Hughes, it just sounds wrong, but it is right. I know I'm right. I'm a Palace fan. I know he's really good. I need to back myself. And then a front three of Salah on the right, Cunha on the left, and Haaland up front.
The front line is ridiculous.
That's killer. That is the front line.
I do think my midfield of Rice, Iwobi and Palmer could potentially make it interesting. I had Pickford in goal, Aina, Van Dijk, Gvardiol, Kirkes.
That is good.
Then Rice, Iwobi, Palmer, and then up front, Mbomo, Isak, and Morgan Rogers. So I do think it gets slightly weaker as the front line comes around. Yeah. But Pete, you get ultimate say.
It'd be a good game, wouldn't it?
It'd be a great game.
Good game.
It would be a good
Premier
game.
League All-Stars.
I mean, that attack against that defence would just be superb. No
pressure.
It's a bit tricky to pick, isn't it? Because, I feel like midfield battle, Dougie's won that.
I think he'd score a lot of goals. I mean, Salah, Haaland, and
but
Cunha.
Front line is much better over.
We'll just sit in my team and break
and let Will Hughes dictate.
Obviously, Van Dijk, amazing centre back on your side, Dougie. I think you got some good picks there. I think I might just be leaning.
That
this
is
way.
absolutely fair enough.
That was really close.
I think that was really close.
I think we should
yeah.
make that game happen.
Yeah.
I'd love to see it.
All Stars. Can we have an
Yeah,
All Stars
the
game?
All-Stars game would be
Yeah.
brilliant. I also want to see North versus South, the actual Premier League, to do that. I think that'd be so fun as well. Guys, whose 11 did you prefer? They've been up on the screen throughout the episode. Massive thanks to Pete. Pete, if they want to read some of your work or listen to you, where can they find you?
Yeah, all the usual places. P Smith XI, like Football 11. You can put that in and you can find me.
Nice. And Ollie, what about you?
Talk CPFC / Ollie Thomas on everything. Consistent branding across the platforms.
Love it. That's what they need. That's what you need. Guys, thank you so much for watching The Lowdown. Let us know what you guys thought about our 11s and we'll catch you next week. Bye-bye.